Believe it or not, Africa was once a superpower in the world. And there's quite a lot of evidence to support this seemingly wild allegation. The most obvious is the reason why the scramble of Africa happened. You don't scramble for something worthless, that is of no value. But there's another piece of evidence much more fascinating. It is recorded that in the year 1324, the West African Empire of Mali was a world superpower. And the Emperor of Mali then, Mansa Musa, visited Cairo in that year of 1324. And during that visit, something extraordinary happened. The Emperor of Mali took so much gold with him to Cairo that the price of gold in Cairo fell very dramatically and remained like that in Cairo for over 12 years. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you, for those who understand economics, very basic economics, that the gold from Mali flooded Egypt so much that gold became almost worthless for over a decade. Now that also tells you, because when you go on a journey, you don't carry everything you own. You only carry a small fraction with you when you're going on an official visit. And of course, Africa has remained resource-rich through the centuries. But Africa, the superpower, declined and faded into oblivion. And let us talk about the major catalyst, which indeed is very relevant to our situation today, that caused that decline. And of course, it is the greatest forced migration of a human population in history, slavery, which was launched in the 15th century. And it started with a technological breakthrough at the time, which allowed ships to sail farther and for longer periods, which resulted in the Mzungu first landing in Africa. Now, the case of Portugal is super interesting and extremely instructive. Portugal were, of course, the first Europeans to land in Africa in large numbers. And the consequence of that is that Portugal became the most prosperous country in Europe shortly after that. Naturally, as a result of them trading with the superpower called Africa, they took away with them resources that saw a prosperity in Portugal that has never been seen again to date. Because the other Wazungus realized what had happened, and they played the game of catch-up. They all quickly rushed to Africa. Now, it is recorded that slavery, or the slave trade, started on the 3,000-mile stretch between the countries today we call Senegal and Angola, on the western part of the continent. And for the next 4 centuries, well over 11 million Africans were kidnapped, captured, and carried away as slaves. Most of them, of course, ended up in the Americas, including the United States of America. On the East Coast, including, of course, East Africa, where we are, it is recorded that well over 14 million Africans were enslaved, carried away as slaves. Initially, most of them ended up in the Arab world. But as the years progressed, many of them were scattered all over the world. Because the Arabs were major slave traders and dealers. Now, it is very important to note the fact that between 1500 and 1900, the population of Africa did not grow naturally because so many people were being carried away from the continent. And of course, this hampered economic development and obviously contributed to a decline of the continent of Africa as a superpower of the world. And although today African countries claim to be independent, the truth is this slavery led to colonialism, which led to the current relationship between African countries and the West that is extremely unequal. Because the truth is, when an African head of state sits at a table with a head of state from a Western country, they are not equal partners. One of them is superior in all ways you can think of. Of course, the Mzungu. And whatever deal they make is usually skewed in favor of the Mzungu. Now, if you find it difficult to even begin to understand what slavery was all about, I suggest that you do what I did. I visited a place in Tanzania called Bagamoyo. Bagamoyo was the main port of exit for slaves in East Africa. That's where they were put on a ship and shipped out to wherever in the world they were being taken to. Now, the name itself, Bagamoyo, actually has a very interesting meaning. For those who understand Kiswahili, it means bwaga moyo. That means defeat the heart, or to feel defeated in your heart. And that name came from the suffering of Africans. Because picture this, you've been captured, you've been kidnapped from your loved ones, from your home, somewhere in the interior. And you've taken the long walk, over 1,000 kilometers to the coast, and you end up at this place called Bagamoyo. Now, when most slaves reached there, all the way down to the coast, they must have been plotting. How am I going to escape? They must have been looking for opportunities to escape. And indeed, a few must have escaped successfully. Sadly, too few. But when you reach this place and you see the ship there and you're in chains, it is too late. And therefore you give up. You become crestfallen. It is too late. The realization hits you that you can now not escape. And that indeed you're gone away from your people forever. Moyo wako unabwagwa. Your heart is defeated completely and crushed. Hence the place Bagamoyo. We call it today Bagamoyo. I was fortunate enough while in Bagamoyo to see some of the few places remaining where slaves were kept waiting for the ships to come in so that they'd be shipped off to wherever, to finish the remaining days of their lives on this earth as slaves in slavery, and to sire children into slavery. All the children were born into slavery, not free people at all. Now today Bagamoyo is a tourist attraction. It's very close to Dar es Salaam. I believe it's a 1.5 hour, 2-hour drive tops from CBD Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And I've heard many people say that Bagamoyo even today is a haunted place. Oh yes, for the people who believe in ghosts and stuff like that. And for somebody who understands spiritual matters, that is easy to believe. And indeed I can tell you from my own experience, because I spent a few nights in Bagamoyo with my family, and they were very excited about the place. They loved the place. But I noticed it's a haunted place. So many strange and bizarre things happen in Bagamoyo during the slave trade era. So many. Many of our brothers and sisters who had been captured as slaves never made it to Bagamoyo. Many of them died on the way, or they became too weak or sick to continue the journey. And of course, you know what happened to them. They were either left there to pass on or they were killed. And this included women and children. And so you can be sure that many of them succumbed at this place called Bagamoyo. And at least one body of a Mzungu was brought to this place with the heart missing. I am talking about the great Dr. David Livingstone. Now the story goes that Dr. David Livingstone died somewhere in what is today Zambia, in 1873. And he had two very faithful African servants called Chuma and Susi. And what Chuma and Susi did, I'm not sure if these were the wishes of Dr. Livingstone, but what they did is that they removed his heart and buried it there, somewhere in Zambia. And then the rest of the body was transported, on foot of course, over 1,600 kilometers to Bagamoyo, where it was loaded onto a ship and taken to the United Kingdom, where it was buried at Westminster Abbey. Now, Dr. Livingstone was loved by Africans. I'm not sure exactly why, but we know that he was greatly against the slave trade. And he fought most of his life to end the slave trade, the very evil slave trade. But still, it is very bizarre to have your heart buried somewhere else, somewhere different from where the rest of your remains are interred. It's just bizarre. Anyway, there's plenty of proof that Dr. Livingstone was loved. Because even today, we have cities, towns in Zambia and Malawi, which are still called Livingstone Town. Now, regulars on this channel will know that I just love history, and I love studying people's lives, biographies. And Dr. Livingstone's biography is one of the most amazing, interesting, strange biographies you can ever study. For instance, he is considered one of the greatest missionaries who ever lived. And yet, he only converted, wait for this one soul. And it is even said that person backslid later. It is also said he was a very poor leader, not able to lead people. He was also a very moody person. Still, no other Mzungu did more than Dr. Livingstone in revealing to the world the full horrors of the slave trade. Because, Mzungus were not able to go into the interior. And therefore the Arab raiders are the ones who ventured deep into the African interior. And therefore these Mzungus were not aware of what the slaves went through. Being captured, kidnapped, and transported under the most inhuman situation and environment that you cannot even begin to think about, all the way across the Atlantic to wherever they were going. And of course, many did not survive the crossing in the sea. Those who were lucky enough to have survived the walk, thousands of kilometers across the African interior, the African wild. Those who survived that and made it to the ship, many others did not survive arriving at the destination where they were going. And so if you're in the slave business, you can imagine, you'd have to take into consideration, for instance, if you needed 100 slaves, you'd have to maybe capture 200, because you realize that maybe only 50%, or slightly more, will survive delivery, if I can call it that. Oh boy. Bottom line, black lives have never mattered. Black lives have not mattered for the last almost 500 years. This is not something that started yesterday. This is not something that started with the latest incident. It is something that has been ongoing for centuries. And I believe enough is enough. It is now time for Africans to wake up and free themselves, even mentally, from this enslavement. And that is why I keep on appealing to Africans to unite. Let us wake up and unite and fight for rights. Yeah, because black lives actually matter. And to our brothers in the United States, yeah, maybe it is time for you to come back home. Oh yes. Because think about it. The only way black lives will matter is if all blacks return home to Africa and unite and grab back our God-given right to be on this planet. Yeah, and of course, prosper. All for a better Africa. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.